Thank you. Up next is the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Crenshaw.
Thank you. I think a lot of the good questions have been asked, so this might feel repetitive. Dr. Diggins, when a lab rejects a dangerous order, is that information shared with anyone? Any federal requirements that would compel you to share that with anyone at all? Or is it just voluntary?
Thank you for the question. Right now, that information, there are two possible routes for sharing. One is through the International Gene Synthesis Consortium, which is an industry consortium of synthesis companies. And the second would be direct with law enforcement. There is no requirement for when that information is shared if an order is denied. And so it's up to company discretion.
But there's at least a place to share it, is what you're telling me?
There are certainly two fora available to share that information, yes.
Which part of law enforcement?
The FBI.
FBI, okay, so FBI is a compository, so they track it, but there's no, would you think it's useful for us to consider legislation that would compel sharing of that?
I think it's useful if we were able to set standards around when that threshold would be reached. The problem is that a lot of this information is highly specific from order to order and can differ in the kinds of threat assessments you might think would lie behind the order.
Is there, I mean, does the association you mentioned earlier, is it established, again, they're the experts on what might seem threatening or suspicious, is there something that you can give us that would help us understand how to take a scalpel to that problem correctly?
I think your question is a really important one, and we've been working with NIST to try and develop standards around customer screening that would try and call out exactly as you would suggest, what would red flags be that should trigger these kinds of reporting.
Right, because I mean, you've argued your company's at a disadvantage if you're doing it voluntarily, while others just sell to whoever, right? It does require an extra administrative burden on the good actors.
That's right. Yeah, right now there's a pretty strong economic incentive not to screen because it's just a cost, and so federal mandates for those practices would be important to making them uniformly adopted.
Okay, for Mr. McKnight. We talked a lot about AI can be used for all sorts of scary things. What about the good parts? What about assisting industry leaders and researchers in identifying biosecurity risks? In other words, again, how can we use AI for good?
Thank you for the question. This builds on the conversation we were having about select agent lists and then the new incredible diversity of threats. The same way the biodesign tools that we're talking about can create new proteins and give kind of lessons on how to create new medicines, those same tools can be turned around, and is why we need to be on the cutting edge of those tools and take a DNA sequence, which is why Biothreat Radar really needs to be built on sequencing, because you get the whole amount of data that you need to look at. It's not just one thing you're testing for. They can be turned around to automate the process of interpreting a sample that you're looking at. And then the development roadmap that is funded through these programs is to use AI to go from sequence detection to what the function is, like Dr. Diggins is talking about. And some of the best cutting edge work on the AI for good, and is why we have to stay at the cutting edge of these biodesign tools, is because when you flip them around and use them for detection and characterization of threats, you can get ahead of this kind of ever perpetual build something new, can you figure out what it is, build something new, can you figure out what it is?
So, and going back to Mr. Diggins, just digging in a little bit more on the screening process, you receive orders domestically and internationally. Is there a difference in how you screen those?
No, they all go through the same screening process. There's a difference in how we interpret the outcome. So some orders might be subject to U.S. export controls.
Okay. Okay, so there are some, if it's an international order, there are some, because of, like you said, U.S. export controls, there are at least some restrictions in place.
That's right.
Under federal law. I'll follow up. And for Dr. Panu, in my last 30 seconds, I'm trying to play a cleanup on all the questions that haven't been asked. Are clinical researchers trained in responsible lab conduct related to AI biorisks? Do we have like a curriculum for that?
Thank you for the question. There isn't currently curriculum for that, but I do believe there's interest, so that would be important to advance.
Okay, very interesting. Yield back, thank you.
The gentleman.